program, basically at the same time we started Friday's program, Vladimir Putin was giving his speech over the claiming of the 4 territories in the Donbas. So let's just have a quick look at some of the points that he made, because some of the things he said were quite interesting. So first of all, sanctions were not enough for the Anglo-Saxons. They moved on to sabotage. It's hard to believe, but it is a fact that they organized the blasts on the Nord Stream international gas pipelines, which run along the bottom of the Baltic Sea. In fact, they began to destroy the pan-European energy infrastructure. It's clear to everyone who benefits from this. Of course, he who benefits did it. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think he's spot on. I think it's very interesting that he's talking about Anglo-Saxons, so he's being very pointed in what he's talking about here. But of course, to say that the Russians destroyed their own pipeline is just an incredible claim. And it's very noticeable that, having claimed that, the West is now letting everything slide. So as Patrick Henningsen said on Friday, very little in the American press about this. Perhaps Mark Anderson's got a comment on it, but the BBC has let it drift over under all of the economic matters. So the fact that a major strategic pipeline was destroyed in what we could call a terrorist attack, nobody wants to talk about it anymore.
But the speech in general was covering a broad range of topics. It wasn't just the pipeline or the annexation and so on. So, for example, this. Do we really want here in our country, in Russia, instead of mum and dad, to have parent number 1, parent number 2, number 3? Have they gone completely insane? Do we want our schools to impose on our children the ideas that certain other genders exist along with women and men, and to offer them gender reassignment surgery? Is that what we want for a country and our children? We have a different future, our own future. David, what are your thoughts?
Well, on the pipeline is clearly correct. I mean, as we were reporting last week, Radek Sikorski, MEP, tweeted out, tweet now deleted, "Thank you, USA," when the pipeline was blown up. And the claim that it was the Russians blowing up their own pipeline is simply laughable. The attack on what you might term wokeness, postmodernism, cultural Marxism, the attack on these elements which are destroying Western society is also very interesting. And he's saying he wants no part of it. And he's saying that Western influence comes with these flaws, diseases, if you will. Viruses is probably a good analogy. And he wants no part of it. And this is going to resonate with many people in the West who also want no part of it. And we'll be reporting on some of those people later in the news.
Yeah. Let's move on with it then. He went on to say, "The truth has been drowned in an ocean of myths, illusion, and fakes, using extremely aggressive propaganda, lying like Goebbels. The more unbelievable the lie, the quicker people will believe it. That's how they operate, the West, that is, according to this principle. But people cannot be fed with printed dollars and euros. You can't feed them with those pieces of paper and the virtual inflated capitalization of Western social media companies that can't heat their homes." Those two paragraphs did run into each other in that way, but clearly he is using very strong language with respect to the way narratives are being portrayed and the way that economic policy is being run in the UK and Europe and the US.
Well, yes. I mean, it does kind of feed more than one thing into the one paragraph, which is slightly odd. Maybe we've lost a bit in translation there. But the idea that the printing paper notes, quantitative easing, and inflation is anything else than harmful, again, will resonate with people who see the harm every day. They see the harm every time they go to the shops and they're trying to feed their families. They see the harm when they get their fuel bills in. So again, this is speaking to things which are accurate, and as a result, it will resonate, including with many people in the West observing this speech.
Yeah, I mean, I think the reason the two paragraphs run together in that way is because the propaganda is, of course, that the reason that the West is in serious financial and economic problems at the moment is all because of Putin and his war. And we'll be coming on to that a little bit later. But this perhaps a little bit more controversial then. It's worth reminding the West that it began its colonial policy back in the Middle Ages, followed by the worldwide slave trade, the genocide of Indian tribes in America, and plunder of India and Africa, the wars of England and France against China, as a result of which China was forced to open its ports to the opium trade. What they did was get entire nations hooked on drugs and purposefully exterminated entire ethnic groups for the sake of grabbing land and resources, hunting people like animals. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, this is a bit of a contradiction with some of the earlier stuff, because this is a cultural Marxist line, the attack on the West, right? So what he's saying there is everything that the Anglo-Saxon nations stand for is the ultimate in corruption and genocide, and that's the attack of the cultural Marxists to destroy the confidence of the British and American people, principally, in their own history, in their own identity, in their own countries. Now, this is, of course, contrary to what he's trying to do for the Russian people, which is the exact reverse, right? Now, if we're looking at unfortunate and bloody history, Russia's got more than a little to go around, right? We've got the Holodomor, 8 million Ukrainians were starved to death, right? So it's an odd direction for him to go in, and I think a bit contradictory, because elsewhere he's saying that the problem with the West is the whole cultural Marxist attack on identity, attack on family, attack on nation, attack on faith. And now he's joining in some of that attack. So you see here where once the bullets start flying, consistency kind of goes out the window. That's unfortunately true for every war.
It's fascinating times, though, David, that we're hearing this from Putin. My mind goes way back to the Cold War, when, of course, supposedly it was easy. We were on the good side, and it was those nasty communists on the other side. And yet we're hearing many words that, as you say, people in this country can resonate with, and then we get a little bit of a drift back the other way. It's a complex situation. I don't know whether Mark has got something to add to this. He was looking.
Yeah, absolutely. When I was at the Red Pill Conference in July in Indianapolis, Dr. David Martin, and this is an article still posted on the UK website, UK Column website, he spoke of the opium trade. And there is truth, however, to what Putin's saying there. That is what was done by Great Britain at that time. They did want to force the Chinese to open their gates to opium and the extreme addiction that brings. So I don't know that it has a Marxist bent so much. I'd have to think that over. But historically, there's some truth to that. And Dr. Martin made a pretty good case of it at the Red Pill Conference.
Thank you, Mark. Let's come on to this one then, because this is quite to the point. Let me repeat that the dictatorship of the Western elites targets all societies, including the citizens of Western countries themselves. This is a challenge to all. This complete renunciation of what it means to be human, the overthrow of faith and traditional values, and the suppression of freedom are coming to resemble a religion in reverse, pure Satanism. Now, that's very strong words.
Yeah, again, this is quite an incredible choice of language. I think a lot of people in this country would also resonate with what he is saying here. But we're in a difficult position because, of course, our own churches have abandoned the flock. So people who are still spiritually aware are not getting the kind of warnings that they should be about what's happening, what Western governments are doing. And it's really incredible that Putin has come forward with this line. David, is this also part of Putin appearing to show an interest in protecting the Russian Orthodox Church?
To an extent, perhaps, but again, he's speaking here. He's speaking really quite truthfully and quite astutely. It's not an opposite of religion. It is a religion, right? So whether you analyze it in terms of Satanism, whether you analyze it in terms of the ideas of Marxism and everything that flows from it, you always end up at it's essentially a religion. And it is essentially against human thriving. And this can be seen in any one of a huge range of ways. and he's correct in calling this out. To actually call it outright Satanism is unusual. It's not many people who will name it. Stefan Molyneux, the now banned by most media philosopher in Canada, was calling out that socialism is Satanism and is starting to explore these similarities. This is unusual to go in that direction, to actually call it that. But in many ways, this is a correct analysis. And the nature of Satanism is of rejection of everything good and destruction and deception. The key thing about Satanist religions is they operate based on deception. They never reveal what they are up front. And that's very much what we're facing in the West, and it's what he's seeing. So again, there's a lot of substance in what he's saying there.
Okay, and let's just end off with this one then, because he said, I want the Kiev authorities and the real masters in the West to hear me so that they remember this. People living in Lugansk and Donetsk and Kherson and Zaporozhye are becoming our citizens forever. So that was absolutely clear. But what did Mr. Zelensky do in Ukraine? Well, here we are. He decided that he would attempt to join NATO as quickly as possible. So he announced he had signed an application for an expedited entry into NATO. He assured people in Ukraine that the entire territory of our country will be liberated from this enemy, the enemy not only of Ukraine, but also of itself, humanity, law, and truth. Russia already knows this. It feels our power. It sees that it's here in Ukraine, and we prove that the strength of our values, and that's why it is in a hurry or organizes this farce with the attempted annexation, tries to steal something that does not belong to it, and so on. Well, he signed that. Unfortunately, although it has had some support within NATO, so here we have nine NATO countries. Who have we got? Poland, Romania, Slovakia, Czech Republic, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Montenegro, and North Macedonia. A joint statement together with the presidents of those countries. I reiterate our support for the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Ukraine. We firmly stand behind the 2008 Bucharest NATO summit decision concerning Ukraine's future membership. However, the United States wasn't so excited. Jake Sullivan, the National Security Advisor, saying the United States has been clear for decades that we support an open door policy for NATO. Any decision on NATO membership is between the 30 allies and the countries aspiring to join. Right now, our view is that the best way for us to support Ukraine is through practical on-the-ground support in Ukraine, and that process in Brussels should be taken up at a different time. So it didn't go quite so well for Zelensky, David, but perhaps there's movement in other directions.
Just before we leave the Zelensky-Kiev front, there was one extract from the Putin speech that you didn't cover, and I think is very significant. He's speaking to the Kiev authorities and the real masters in the West, and I think again that's a valid point. He said, we call on the Kiev regime to immediately end hostilities, end the war they unleashed back in 2014, and return to the negotiating table. We are ready for this, but will not discuss the choice of the people in Donetsk, Luhansk, Zaporozhye, and Kherson. That has been made. Russia will not betray them. So he's offering an end to hostilities. Okay, that's significant. Now, there's no sign that Zelensky's taking that up. I don't think that's the right decision. I don't think that's the right decision for the Ukrainian people. But there is an offer, and this is the first public offer we've seen in a long, long time, of peace talks. And what has there been in response from the West? Has there been anything positive from the West, from the Ukrainians of the West, in response to that? No, not a word. Quite
the opposite, insightful policy.
Yeah, and perhaps we can also add that, of course, Boris Johnson is now out of the picture, and Liz Truss is under huge pressure. So whether Zelensky feels that he's going to take advice from the British from now on is going to be very interesting. I say that because, of course, many people believe that it was Boris Johnson that squashed the previous peace talks.
Indeed.